Hi, I'm Galit Kaunitz.
And I'm Jackie Wilson. And you're listening to Double Reed Dish,
a podcast for oboists,
bassoonists,
and the people who love them.
So we are here at Miami University Bassoon Day with the maker of the magic.
The real deal. The powerhouse. We are here with Emily Prochaska, bassoon student, who organized this Bassoon Day as her honors project. Welcome, Emily.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Tell us a little bit about why you started the Bassoon Day in the first place.
So I'm a senior here at Miami studying bassoon performance and arts management. So I have two majors, and I'm a member of the honors program. And I was interested in pursuing an honors with distinction project. And I wanted something that combined both my passions for playing bassoon and my arts management interests. And so I thought, why not a Bassoon Day? And the idea came to me in the spring, and I kind of formulated over the summer months. But I was thinking, IDRS only rolls around once a year, and for students like me, it's kind of inconvenient to fly to like Granada, Spain, or a location like that to engage in master classes, meet with vendors, network, that sort of thing. So I thought there needed to be some sort of location in the area that was more accessible to students of all ages. And today we have high school students here, middle school students, college students, and graduate students, and then just professionals, local freelancers. And so I wanted a venue and a space and a location that would be accessible to a lot of people that could come and experience these things outside of an international conference. So I decided to present the idea to the honors program and to Dr. Reynolds, and I asked him to be my advisor for the project, and we just went to town planning it this summer, and it's just been a continuing process.
And when you dreamed the dream of dreams, what did you think of to include in this all-star lineup that you have here?
Well, my first request was, I think I was scrolling through Facebook one day, and I saw, of course, I'm a huge fan of your podcast series.
Go on.
And the very first thing that we formulated on the schedule was this live podcast series. And I saw your, post on Facebook, and I said, Dr. Reynolds, we need to pursue this. So I texted him immediately when I saw your post, and he was all for it, and followed up, and we are so thrilled to have you here. It's really, really exciting.
So you have the Ultimate Podcast Divas here, right. But how did you formulate the other events that you wanted to? I mean, once you got the most important part out of the way, then how did you go about formulating the rest of the day?
Well, of course, nothing can compare to this, so
correct.
Everything else is just a letdown. No, just kidding. We're really lucky to have everyone involved here. Keith Buncke, who is principal bassoonist in the Chicago Symphony, is with us, and he will be giving a master class and performing later this afternoon. We were thinking, who would be an artist that, maybe students wouldn't have access to meeting? And Dr. Reynolds is good friends with Keith. They went to Interlochen Arts Academy together and have studied with some of the same teachers. And he pitched him the idea, and he was all for it. And we're absolutely thrilled to have him here. So really the idea was trying to find somebody that students maybe wouldn't get to interact with if they were on a college visit or at a summer festival and that sort of thing. So we're really lucky to have him. And then many fabulous vendors are here with us today, and we're very thankful for them giving up their time and coming, and it's really an exciting schedule.
So a little bit ago, we were hanging out backstage and we were talking about your next steps, and you are right in the middle of the intense process of applying for graduate schools. And we have a lot of student listeners who will go through this, are currently going through this. So talk to us a little bit about your experience and maybe give those students some words of encouragement during this time. Everyone's got to go through it, but you're in the middle of it, so we want your perspective.
Yeah, that's great. So I have one more audition left. I've already had 5. And I think my best piece of advice is to start the process early, first of all. I think there's I've already been through actually 2 rounds of these auditions because I applied for my undergraduate degree as well. And I think visiting the schools, taking lessons with the professor is just as important in graduate school as it is in undergraduate school. Really getting a sense for the program and developing that relationship. So starting early is really important. I think also trying to learn as much about the program as you can, interacting with other graduate students that are already studying there. I've spent a couple of days at all the schools that have been applying to, trying to listen to concerts, take lessons, meet students. I think that's really important. And my best piece of advice is no matter what the results, it will work out in the end. It's a very stressful time, but I think you're putting in the work and you're developing those relationships. And I like to believe that everything happens for a reason. So I think the universe will work out that way. So we'll see where I end up, but it's exciting.
It's beautiful. And what are you going to do for self-care when this is all tied up in a neat little bow and you have some time to relax?
So as soon as my last audition is next weekend, and as soon as that is over, I think I'm going to take a day off and definitely watch some Netflix, spend time with my family, my pets, hike. I'm really into being outdoors, so maybe take a walk if it's warm enough, bike, just do something relaxing and not bassoon related. I will not be opening my bassoon case for a day, but then after that, it's back to recital planning and practicing. So
perfect.
Well, Emily, we can't wait to watch you take over the bassoon world and see all the amazing things that are going to come. And, once you're a colleague, welcome you on Double Reed Dish.
Thank you. That was so nice. Thanks for interviewing me.
So in this next segment of our podcast, we would like to invite up the host of this Bassoon Day, Ryan Reynolds. Let's give him a round of applause. We love to start by asking how you came to the bassoon in the first place.
Oh, yeah. So my story is a little bit different than a lot of people's. I had a middle school band director for a father. So I knew I was going to do music no matter what. It was inevitable. I wasn't particularly hot on the idea. He had about 10 trumpets sitting in a closet just waiting for me, right? And I remember when I was in 5th grade hearing the 6th graders, they gave us a concert so that we could hear what the instruments sounded like and we could choose accordingly. And either I had a really poor ear at the time or the bassoonist was really bad because I thought the bassoon only played one note.
Oopsie.
And I thought that would just be the easiest thing to do in band. If I had to do it, I can just sit there and play one note over and over. I figured out pretty quickly that there were about 3.5 octaves of notes, and the challenge of it is what actually became fun and addicting.
So talk to us about where you went to school, your education and training journey. How did you get to where you are today?
Sure. I was really, really fortunate to grow up in northern Michigan, just about 2 hours away from the Interlochen Arts Academy. And I ended up going there for all 4 years of my high school and studied with Eric Stomberg. And while I was there, I also met Jeff Lyman, who now teaches at the University of Michigan. So I ended up in Michigan for my bachelor's and master's degrees. Funnily enough, also at Interlochen, I met Jeff Kieseker, who teaches bassoon at Florida State, and that's where I ended up pursuing my doctorate. So I guess really my whole life began freshman year of Interlochen Arts Academy.
Yeah, we can't help but notice your Michigan-colored shoes. Do you feel an internal conflict teaching in Ohio at all?
No, I don't. No, but one of the fun things about being a Michigan alumni is just participating in all the swag that they put out. That Nike Jordan contract that they have, it makes for great Christmas gifts.
Okay.
So can you tell us more about why you decided to pursue teaching the bassoon on a collegiate level?
Sure. So when I got into college, I was pretty aimless. I mean, you wouldn't necessarily expect that, given that I spent 4 years of high school studying music pretty intensely. But when I got to Michigan, I had it in my head that I wanted to be a creative writer. I came full circle, got really into bassoon again. And then I'm also part of a group called the Acropolis Reed Quintet, and a big part of our mission professionally is to do educational and community outreach activities in Detroit and just sort of the greater world. And in doing that, in getting to explore those kinds of opportunities, I realized that not only was I okay at teaching just as a baseline, but I had a real taste for it, and I loved the act of teaching and seeing students grow, seeing myself grow from it, right? I mean, as a teacher, you're challenging yourself to learn more and more and accumulate more knowledge. And it just seemed to be the kind of track that I found joy in. And once I realized that, my life became very clear, and I knew I wanted to be a pedagogue.
So as a member of Acropolis Winds, talk to us about how chamber music has added to you as a musician, what you get from it, what the benefits are. When I was a high schooler, I pretty much did maybe a woodwind quintet to get ready for solo and ensemble, but it wasn't a part of my musical identity.
Yeah.
Talk to us about that.
Well, chamber music, I personally, and I don't want to step on any band director's feet here or anything like that, but I think chamber music is this like exceptional laboratory for exploring all kinds of learning. So there's musical, technical, but also interpersonal. You have to collaborate with other musicians and figure out how to get along, plan rehearsals, be on the same page, communicate. These are all a lot of things that you don't necessarily get in a typical college experience, but when you're locked in a room rehearsing a few times a week with the same people every time, you're going to rub up against each other, and that's life, and you've got to learn how to deal with it. And then beyond that, it's portable. So it's something that I, or as a member of the group, can pick up and take with us around the world. I've gotten to see all kinds of places. I played in the Middle East, in Abu Dhabi, in Germany, Juneau, Alaska, which I know is the U.S., but it feels like a foreign country, all because of chamber music. So, for anybody in the audience that is looking at going into college or is in college currently, and you just haven't dived into, your wind quintet or reed quintet perhaps, I really can't encourage it enough. And that's why we try to do things here like have the Miami Bassoon Quartet. They do exceptional work and a lot of it every week. And that I know they get a lot from it, and that's the whole point.
Mm-hmm. One of my favorite questions to ask is, can you share with us an embarrassing moment that happened to you on stage?
Sure. There's so many.
How do you choose?
So the first one that comes to mind, I'll skip over all the I left my music off stage kind of thing. This happened about 20. With Acropolis, there are a couple of us in the group that usually present the concerts from the stage. We inform the audience about the pieces we play, talk about the composers, and it's nothing difficult. I'm usually pretty good at just talking about music. And there was just this concert that we were playing in Gettysburg, Pennsylvania, and I think it was around election time, so I might have been stressed out or something, but I was up there on stage and started talking about Gershwin's An American in Paris, a speech I have given 100 times. And I got to the middle of it and completely forgot everything I had rehearsed for the prior 2 years. I had no idea what I was going to say next. And I left it on a cliffhanger. The really interesting thing is...
Nothing. Nothing interesting.
I literally had nothing. And I looked to the group and I said, guys, I'm sorry, I'm froze.
The audience was cool, sounds like a great piece.
Yeah, exactly. But fortunately, it's only ever happened the one time. Better me talking than when I'm playing bassoon, I suppose.
Okay, well, we have a firm stance in this family, but we need to ask you the really big, important question now.
This is the real deal.
All right.
Beyonce or Lady Gaga?
Lady Gaga.
Off the stage with you. Goodbye. Thank you, Ryan. Cool. So for our next segment, we want to bring out someone who, I think he's okay at the bassoon. Right. I've heard he's fine. So will you please welcome to Double Reed Dish stage, Keith Buncke, Principal Bassoon of the Chicago Symphony Orchestra. So the audience already heard our favorite question to start with. How did you begin playing the bassoon?
So my first instrument was piano, which my mom kind of started my sister and I on. I think I was like 7, and then I played cello for a few years, starting at age 9, like 4th grade, kind of starting in orchestra. And I wasn't super into either one of those instruments. Didn't really kindle the musical fire inside of me so much. But then I listened to some recordings of the Brandenburg Concerto, specifically the first one, which actually has bassoon in it, and an oboe as well. And so I really was attracted to the sound of those wind instruments. And so then I went home and looked up both the oboe and the bassoon in the encyclopedia. And the bassoonist, like in the picture in the encyclopedia, looked really relaxed. It was really comfortable.
How'd the oboist look?
Well, the oboist looked like really red in the uncomfortable. So I think that maybe that influenced me to play the bassoon. But then we were able to find a private teacher, and then pretty soon I was in 6th grade band and so forth.
So tell us a little bit more about your educational journey, your training, and maybe more about how you got to where you are today.
Sure. Yeah. So it was really interesting to hear Ryan talk about his past with Interlochen. That's something that we have in common, that we share. I met Ryan. I think we first met at the Interlochen Bassoon Institute back in 2008, and so I had really good private teachers. Studied with Mark Eubanks in Portland, Oregon. He was previous principal bassoonist at the Oregon Symphony. So he got me off on a really good foot. And then I went to Interlochen for my junior and senior years of high school, so my last 2 years of high school. And I also studied with Dr. Eric Stomberg. And that I think when I got there, that's when I really kind of started getting serious about like music in general, and also like playing the bassoon. And it was a great like environment for me just to kind of get obsessed with it and really kind of take a deeper dive into it. Yeah, okay, so then from Interlochen, I went to Curtis Institute of Music, and I went there at the normal age of 18 after graduating Interlochen, and I ended up spending 3 years there. I auditioned for the Atlanta Symphony. This was the beginning of my 3rd year at Curtis, and I think no one really expects to win an audition, obviously, but I got to the trials with that, and that year was kind of spent I think really kind of gearing up for that, like getting ready for that trial process and everything, and so it ended up being a pretty long kind of drawn out process. But then then I started with the Atlanta Symphony right after my 3rd year out of Curtis, and then kind of during my first and only season with the Atlanta Symphony, the CSO position opened up, and obviously that's a pretty unique opportunity. So I went for that and won that in January, and then I've now been with the CSO for I think this is my 4th season now.
Great. And we want to dive more into the process of auditioning and preparing, but first we need to know what GIF most accurately portrays how you felt after winning your principal bassoon audition in the Chicago Symphony Orchestra.
Very important question.
So the 3 choices here.
Yes, which most accurately describes your feelings?
Oh gosh, probably the upper left.
Okay.
It's funny. I mean, I'm not the most like outward, so I'm definitely not the elf. And I wasn't so cocky as to be the woman in the upper right. So
her name is Beyonce.
To be honest, I think it actually kind of like the news. It started hitting later. Like it was sort of a delayed effect. It wasn't like right away. I was just sort of like stunned more than anything.
Right. That's amazing. So you talked about getting obsessed was the phrase you used, and you were able a lot of us go to complete our undergrad, go to graduate school, sometimes multiple degrees, in order to get the professional training that we need to enter the field and make a living. Mm-hmm. And you were able to bypass a lot of those years that most people put in. Mm-hmm. So I want to hear about your the level of intensity, the approach, and how. We can't say how you get those results, but in retrospect, what contributed to being able to bypass those years that many people have to put in?
Yeah, it's an interesting question. I think, I don't know. I mean, it's interesting. I mean, again, I think it was I think like with anything, it's just like you just have to sort of follow your passion and what really drives you. And, I would just encourage like anyone, find what you're really passionate in and really go with it and pursue it. I guess, I think it's partly like a personality type. I think like I kind of thrive in that kind of like focusing on one singular thing and really kind of diving deep into it. I think, I think it's, it's a fortunate mix of like, again, like really good teachers, like kind of all the way growing up, like having like really good support from my parents and those kind of resources, being in an environment like Interlochen, I think, it's a tool like that, you can kind of, waste the time or the resources that you get at a place like that, or, Curtis or anywhere, but it's, I think, I just remember like go to the library, like check a bunch of like recordings and scores and, that was the first, I think like Dr. Sombert, he was really good about enforcing that. Like, it's not just about the bassoon and just kind of getting a grasp of like, kind of like orchestral music, like chamber music and, just kind of getting out of I think a lot of times what can happen to us is like we get this myopic sort of view of like, the bassoon or the oboe or whatever instrument we play and I think like all of us, like we, when we start out on the instrument, it's like, it's normal to like really be passionate about like the music for that instrument, but then it's like you have to listen to other types of music and sort of develop yourself as a musician overall. So I think I sort of got a quick grasp of that kind of early on. And yeah, so I think it's a mix of all those things. I don't know. It's kind of hard to say like why someone would like sort of get focused or get their head in the game like earlier rather than later. I think there's plenty of successful people that have are bloom later, right? So
yeah. I remember when we had Christopher Millard on, he said he felt there was a direct connection between the students who would study scores and recordings and the students who were the most successful. There was a direct link between that work.
Totally. I mean, it totally gets reflected in how you play and like how you approach anything. I mean, no matter what kind of music you're playing, but especially excerpts, it's like having that kind of knowledge of the context and what it sounds like when you're playing with the orchestra.
Right. I would love to hear more about your process preparing for these auditions, Atlanta and Chicago.
Sure. Let's see. I mean, I think I ended up spending like between like 4 and 6 weeks of like really, like that was like the only thing I was working on, the primary thing, and really like every day, like spending several hours and like on all, each of the excerpts. And I sort of developed like a few different techniques that really helped me. I think like putting like metronome markings like on the calendar and like sort of saying like, okay, this is like the goal tempo I want to get to, like say like a week before the audition, and kind of ramp it up and like certain like key excerpts, especially like Marriage of Figaro or Ravel Piano Concerto, like touch it like every day or like every other day, rather than like trying to do it a bunch, like do it like 1 or 2 hours in one practice session. I think for me that was proved more effective, kind of having that gradual ramp up of the speed of the excerpts, and then I found it really helpful like recording myself. I remember specifically for the Chicago audition, I would like at the end of kind of the day, my practice day, I made like a bag full of like all the excerpts, on individual pieces of paper, and so like I would just pick them at random and play like a little mini sort of mock audition for myself, just my living room, and do like part of the solo, like moving the solo piece, and then like 5 or 6 excerpts, and then like play it all through, like as if you were actually playing it in the audition setting. And then like I would go back and like listen and like take notes, and then like, ooh, now I have this stuff to work on for tomorrow or the next read whenever I come back to that particular excerpt. And then I found it useful to actually play live, like in a space like this would be great. Play for your colleagues, play for your teachers, people that you respect, like you can really take their comments to heart. I found that really helpful, if only for the experience of just do live performing, like just kind of being under the gun and just having to play the excerpt in a slightly uncomfortable kind of situation.
Well, that brings us to our next question, because I remember really idealizing, especially when I was younger, people with gigantic jobs, right? And I wouldn't be surprised if there was someone in the room who assumes you don't get nervous, right? So our next question, which gift most accurately represents how you feel just before taking the stage to play a big solo?
Probably close, like on the right. but then it's interesting. I think the Bring It On in the top left. I think you kind of have to. I think I've gotten better over the years, or more and more cultivated that like you sort of. It's almost like you put on a costume, or you fake it till you make it. You sort of have to override that sort of fight or flight response, But I mean, totally. I mean, like that still happens to me. Yeah, it sort of diminishes over time. I think just naturally with experience, and like playing with a great orchestra like Chicago Symphony will definitely like get you that like experience and kind of maybe harden you up a little bit. But I mean, like that kind of solo or something. Yeah, there's always an element there for sure.
What advice would you give to a young musician who aspires to have a career like yours?
I think what I tell my students a lot is, I think specifically my teacher at Curtis, Daniel Matsukawa, he was really good about this, like talking about how you have like 2 halves to yourself as a bassoonist and musician. So like one half is like the instrumentalist, like the bassoonist, like you've got the reed making and practicing the scales, practicing fundamentals, and like just like getting better at the instrument specifically. And then the other equally important half is yourself as a musician. And that kind of goes back to what I was talking about earlier about listening to different recordings and being curious about like scores and the different composers and all this stuff. Like going, I think the great thing is like being in school is like you can go to all these different like live performances. Go to performances of your colleagues. I think that's really, really important, and always like never taking it for granted. Like really being present as you can be, and being critical too of what you're listening to. So I think, and I love to sing a lot. I love to like when I'm at home as kind of another sort of practice tool. I feel like that helps me conceptualize like how I want the music to sound, and then I try, and it always comes short, obviously, but I try to emulate that on the bassoon. So, and then of course, like the consistent like hard work and dedication, like that's the most important thing. It's like what you do every day is more important than what you do once in a while. It's like the consistent like scales and like long tones and all that kind of good stuff. It's like you build it brick by brick.
Last question. You put in the work and then you reap the reward. Which gift most accurately represents how you feel after you have done a great job on a big solo?
I would say it's a mix of King of the World and flopping on the yeah, I'm not sure what the Stewie Griffin over that. I'm not sure. He sort of looks like PTSD.
Cool, so that's our live show for today. Thank you to the Miami University Bassoon Studio, Dr. Reynolds, Keith Buncke, and you all for joining us today. Don't forget to go to Dillery Dish to find out more about what we do. Jackie, time to end this parade. Don't make green!